program might contain strong language. If you think you may be offended, switch off now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Inside Podcast. I am Rob, and joining me today is Ashkan Karbasfrooshan, WatchMojo CEO. And today we're here to talk SoundMojo. So, what is the latest news about SoundMojo, Ash?
The latest news, yeah. So, I mean, Rob, if I'm not mistaken, when SoundMojo launched like a decade ago, SoundMojo 1.0, you weren't working with us, right?
I was not working yet, but my band was one of the signed SoundMojo artists.
I remember. That's where I was going with this. What are the odds then that we have this show together now? But yeah, so actually, let's start with that before talking about the evolution of SoundMojo. So, instead of me boring people with the details, you were part of a band, a musical artist. You hear about SoundMojo. You worked at one of our competitors, so you kind of knew about us. I actually would love to just hear from you. Like, what did you think about it then? How did it go? And then we could segue to SoundMojo 2.0 this year and now 3.0, so to speak, as it evolves. Yeah, take it away.
It was a while back, so forgive me if my memory is not as sharp with all the details, but I remember being discovering that you guys were launching SoundMojo and being intrigued, and then meeting up with my colleague Joe, who had been spearheading that at the time. And it just sounded like a cool opportunity. There was basically no downside because, we would just provide you guys with some of our music. You would distribute it on YouTube. And, it was kind of like free publicity. And I know that several artists on the channel actually did, reach an audience and stuff like that. Some of my band's music got pretty good reach and feedback too. And then there were cool things like the live stream that you guys put together. That was like during the COVID period, which was pretty neat. We sent in some live footage of us playing, and that was strung together as a live stream. So a lot of cool, fun things happened during that phase 1 period.
You don't have to tell me the exact. Did you make any revenue from that, or was it more promotional visibility?
I think it was more promotional. I don't recall any revenue coming through, but I do know that part of the contract was a rev share split, for whatever was generated. But I don't think we got a significant number of views on our stuff.
Yeah, there were definitely some artists and some songs that did get a lot of mileage, and I'm assuming that might have triggered some rev share. But I agree. So, I mean, you kind of nailed it. I even forgot about the live stream during COVID when we all lost our minds and we all tried to help in the little ways that we could. But yeah, so I mean, you captured it well. I think anybody, the 0.0001% that like kind of know about the origins and when I started WatchMojo, I think they know that like music was always my main favorite category growing up. That's what I would get lost in. Sports as well, and film and movies. Obviously, I'm a huge fan, but I defer to you guys. You guys, the team, are the experts there. But yeah, so I always wanted to have like music as a pillar, not just in terms of editorial that we curate into lists or verses or bios, but in the back of my mind, I was like, hey, the same way that now with studios, if you have an audience, you could then draft off and, develop scripted programming. Music was always something. And, a decade ago, like SoundMojo, the way we went about it, I think made sense. The problem was your band and the other dozens of bands. It wasn't like Def Jam that you're like, okay, I get it. It's a rap, label. Or, if you had even like back in the day, Geffen had like sub brands, or Universal's a great example. Each one has a sound, a style. We didn't really have that. I admit, one guy was maybe thrash. The other person was rock. Somebody could have been alternative. And, we did our best to promote it. But I guess with COVID, we kind of de-emphasized it. So if you fast forward, last year there was like a couple in the last 2 years, like 2024, 2025. I kind of was like, we're coming to our 20-year anniversary, and this was something that I kind of dusted off. And I don't want to rehash the whole story. The initial idea was kind of taking themes, genres, eras, and the way WatchMojo curates and presents. I wanted to keep that. I thought that would be a pillar. So we would then kind of like give it our take. And the first album, which was inspired by pop songs that were like Iranian, I was like, if I translate these and then recreate them as hard rock, heavy metal, we spent just a bit less than a year trying to convey the vision and get artists to kind of produce these. And there was a lot of reasons. Mainly, I would say creatively, it was hard to convey the vision. And then there was some logistics, to put it sadly in that way, where one of the artists
That's
was
the first
away,
album, an appropriate but tough first album to work on.
Yeah, it added a lot of complexity. But then, yeah, so just for those who may be hearing of it the first time, admittedly, when we came across AI, I was like, hey, this would be a great way. Even though I had reservations, I won't lie, I overcame those reservations when I saw, like, okay, these are yielding and turning out really, really good to the ear music. And the main thing for me is that it captured the kind of like the vision that I had for the sound.
Where are you, my love so dear? Whisper softly, let me hear. I wrote a song with you in mind, a tale of love sincere and kind.
But I won't lie, it's a story as old as time. Boy wants to create music. Boy uses AI to make music. Boy then gets dragged for using AI. And then boy just goes back to the drawing board and says, let's reshuffle things. So we had talked about an American Idol-like show that is in development. And as artists, and to be fair, while artists, like musicians and non-musicians, both were somewhat like, well, I don't love that this is AI. There was also, frankly, a lot more of a silent majority of musicians who are like, hey, I'm a musician. I use AI. It's a bit touchy. I get what you're doing. And I like that you have this roadmap to bringing musicians on now that your vision is kind of fleshed out, these demos. But when I kind of was asking, well, where are you based? I wanted to make it really easy on the musicians. And I kind of naively was like thinking this is the 80s Sunset Boulevard where like all the rockers are in LA, or, you know, all the hipsters are in New York. What I realized is there was like a dude in Scotland, a guy in Tallahassee, an amazing singer in, you know, Mississauga. And we being in Montreal, I was like, okay, how would you feel about coming to Montreal? And as I was asking, you work with me, I don't like to bother people. So I was like, that's a big ask, you know, telling musicians to get on a plane. Like, I didn't want to do it virtually. It defeated the purpose. But I won't lie, as I was kind of asking, like, where are you from? Where would this make sense? It was either going to be a big royal pain in the butt for them, which I did not love, or a big royal pain in the butt for us. So I kind of, we'll talk a little bit about what made me rethink. But to land here for the intro, admittedly, I just went back to the drawing board and I said, well, at this American Idol-like thing, you would obviously have prizes, which is cold hard cash. And this is maybe where my nature, I felt at first it would be a bit crass to be like, here's money, you know, like that Mad Men soundbite. That's what the money is for. So, but I was like, well, if you're going to basically be giving people financial compensation, both for their time and in exchange for their creative output, I was just like, as I was returning from vacation, sorry, still fighting a cold and jet lag and all that, I was like, you know what? Why don't you just bring up the fund? And if you do the fund first, you're kind of the same philosophy I had with employees 20 years ago. If you show loyalty to your team, they will reward you with loyalty. I was like, you know what? I don't like this term, but instead of dicking anybody around saying, you got to come to Vegas or Montreal or LA for a show and it takes time and money, I was like, you know what? There was a simple solution here. And so we basically launched the fund this week. And the feedback was amazing. It was obviously, like I would say, the first feedback after the demos came out. We kind of had explained it was AI. Admittedly, we could have been more clear, for sure. But we're never hiding that. The feedback was really, really good. We'll touch on that. But then afterwards, when, as part of many other things, people kind of pounced on it, it was an easy target. Obviously, there was some pushback, some backlash even. So for me, you know, as an entrepreneur, as a builder, I was just like, okay. And now the feedback's been polar opposite, where we've had dozens upon dozens of people interested. And for me, it kind of solves it because I don't have to go have that rough, rigid feedback, you know, one-on-one, like, well, I don't like this sound. This is what I wanted. So this is like, hey, here's 50 songs, 5 albums we produced in a few months, which again took a year of writing and testing. But it's like, this is kind of conveys what we want. If you are interested, here's $1,000 for the full song, or here's $500, and then you get 50% of that share going forward. And the reason why I asked you is because, yeah, there's so much content, there's so much clutter, both real and AI, but forget even AI, just in terms of the amount of sheer content that users are pumping out, if there's no rev share for even 80%, at least you get to maximize your earnings. So that's kind of how we have arrived to here.
Cool. So what I'm interested to know is why this big investment into music? Is it a good category within media right now?
No, I mean, look, the reality is, if you're seeing, let's zoom out, if you're seeing all this money going to sports franchises, and yeah, little parentheses, we're also doing our part to bring back the Expos to Montreal. But if you look at why sports business and sports franchises are getting so much money, is because live experiences after COVID, people are willing to pay a lot more for experiences, right? And now with AI, it's, live is one of the rare things that might not be disrupted. So that's a thesis for a lot of investors. Sorry. But really, if you think of like as a pyramid, you got live, then you got theatrical video, you got merchandise, you got gaming, you got streaming of super premium content. And then that's actually after that, you have social video, which is like where at the end of the day, even Mr. Beast, that's basically social video. It's not very lucrative. But even below that is everything that's audio, podcast, and music. So admittedly, it's not really like, if ever somebody was like, oh, this is a money grabber, I'm like, no, let's pause. That's kind of nonsense, because music is not really the first thing that I, as an investor, would focus on, not even as an entrepreneur. But as I said, I love music the same way I kind of figured out a model for YouTube 20 years ago. I did figure out a model, but to quote Chris Rock, just because you could drive with your feet doesn't mean you should. But for me, it was also very interesting, admittedly, to imagine the two different conversations. And I'm honest, like I will select the arguments, but I'm not duplicitous. Imagine me going to my board. I don't need their permission, but I'm accountable. I'm a professional. So I explain this and I go, yes, it's a passion project. Yes, I believe we could create good songs, but ultimately painting what could possibly be a business opportunity down the road, it's not obvious, but I was like, I believe this is how we could do it. But then to another key stakeholder, whether it's the fans, the critics, like the viewers that come and go, that both love us and love to take shots at us, it's very different, because to them, they're like, oh, you're just doing this for money. And I'm like, no. A lot has to happen before we see a penny. And yes, we're willing to write a check, because I always said the demos were a concept. Even if the people would have never said anything, even if people were like, oh, dear Supreme Leader, thank you for your vision to use AI to do this, I would have said, not so fast, Mojumbo. There's no money in this. If you really want to make it a commercial thing, well, you need tours, you need albums, you need merchandise, and that's where humans come in, right? But so for me, it really was a bit of like, even if some feedback's unfair, even if something is based on misconception, there's always good takeaways, right? So to me, even if most of the people loved the songs at first, when I heard, again, remove 80% of just the noise, that's just noise. When I ultimately went to the root of it, I said, Ash, you were going to pay people to produce music. It seems a bit crass, but ultimately musicians are pros. They're having a hard time earning an income in this climate. Just go with it. So for me, it's kind of like the same vision and strategy, but as I've always said, the tactics and the steps have to change.
Yep. So take us through a little bit of that feedback. You mentioned that when you kind of announced SoundMojo 2.0 in that article this January, the first few songs that were launched, the feedback was generally very good. So what was your impression building off of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you'll see, like the feedbacks when you went through the comment section were overwhelmingly positive. And I assure you, the like-dislike ratio, any objective metric, was like 90% positive. And I thought that, yeah, I mean, look, I say I'm a nobody, but at the end of the day, even as a curator, when we started our list, I was the lead writer, lead researcher on the music list. I always felt like I kind of had a good ear for what is good music, although that's very subjective and taste, and, you could agree or disagree. But the feedback was really, really good. But I myself was like, okay, what do I do with this? And my next step was the American Idol type of thing. But it was partly, I won't lie, because of the positive feedback. And when I kind of separated the criticism, fair or unfair, I said, look, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. You did spend years of your life writing these lyrics and envisioning these sounds that now AI allowed you to faster convey to a musician, this is what I'm looking for. If you're interested, great. If you're not, good luck to you. Go sing whatever you want. It's a free world. But that was the point, that I think I'm kind of happy that I did still launch it when we did in January. I think I announced it January 30th. So pretty much from February till about May or June, the feedback was super, super good. But this, in a way, everything happens for a reason. I do see this being a lot more successful now by doing the fun first. I think getting people to try to come. I mean, we had like, let's say, a dozen plus artists interested, and just the logistics of where this boondoggle is going to be was giving me migraines. Whereas when I said, hey, here's a fund, and I had alluded to it when we announced studios, that I said, well, there's going to be a fund for soundtracks and all that. So when we just announced it, then it just shot up. And I also think objectively that there were a lot of musicians who were emailing me when I was sending them these samples and demos and proof of concepts. And they were like, oh, it's incredible sound, but I could tell it's AI because it's perfect, right? So musicians view it differently. But I'm not here to go like, oh, these people are wrong who criticized it. I think it was fine and it was fair. And ultimately, ironically, they helped us probably get on a better path for SoundMojo to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point. And one of the things that I noticed, because I think you had sent a survey out to the company asking for our feedback about some of the songs. And I'm pretty sure I included in mine that something along those lines, like some of the parts did sound a little bit too perfect, or something that I couldn't imagine a human being able to play. Like it was a bit too advanced. You know what I mean?
So
that's one thing that I
is
noticed.
No, sorry. I thought you were finished. But yeah, look, when I asked, and again, it's not, oh, dear Supreme Leader, it's not North Korea. People love to criticize me at the company. They know like that's like the way I evaluate them at the end of the year or ongoing. It's like, do you give good feedback? Do you find ways to make better? So the feedback, those who replied, let's be clear, let's say we have 40, 50 full-timers, 100 freelancers. Let's say I got about 20 replies, and most of them were like, yeah, it's really smart. Songs are good. We get the angle, like whether it's classical music adapted into heavy metal anthems, writing lyrics to match what the theme would be, clever, aria. Okay, we get it. Super passion project, current, taking techno songs and reimagining them as instrumental rock songs. I mean, let's be honest, I think those are clever ways to package. And also there's legal things, like I understand the limitations of copyright around AI, same way that building a business around fair use was hard, figured that out. There was one person, and I love them for saying this, that person was like, look, I personally will never like listen or even indulge in AI music because I grew up this and that. And I said, I love you, bro. I love you for saying this. I want to hear that. I didn't really get pushback, I'll be honest, but this is not like, oh, I'm right. I just want a lesson, for the context crowd. And we're posting this on SoundMojo because we'll get into the FAQ. I told a lot of people on LinkedIn, I'm like, get off LinkedIn and go like touch grass and listen to Main Street America. If I would have, as I was describing SoundMojo to everybody and the build-up and the roadmap and explaining all this, people were like, brilliant, so smart, this is really clever, and like props. But then when it hits Main Street, that's where I think oftentimes sometimes it's good to get different perspectives. So I'm quite psyched because I did feel, believe it or not, I was like, okay, if I just kind of go, hey, when I was like in my 40s, finally I decided to produce music. And these are like 5 albums plus, but like at least 5 full albums that in a few months I kind of blitzed, and each song had like 20, 30 demos and all that. I would have been proud. But the issue was I did have musicians getting back to me who were like, well, I did a demo. What do you think about it? Or I'm interested. And I did have like a bit of a reluctance because I was like, yeah, I don't care if people come again and they're like, oh, this was once AI. But I was like, are you interested? Are you willing to then get the odd criticism that some guys like, this is AI? And you're like, no, I re-recorded it, but there is a bit of noise and baggage. And I also think that comes with maturity, that you do have to kind of like ignore that a bit. Like you listen to it, but you don't want to just go with, the herd. But so this fund really removed all the things that I don't love. Like, I don't have to actually listen to somebody's demo, and it might be great. That's your soul, that's your heart, but that wasn't my vision. You know, I'm also allowed to have my vision of what I want. And, you know, with WatchMojo, the first few lists, I would do a lot of it. I would write, I would explain how I wanted the B-roll, like the sequences, and then I led it to the team, and they kind of made it better. So the best part here is that it removes a lot of like the prickly, uncomfortable conversations. We're making, you know, here's an example of a demo. This is the sound we want. This is, sure, there are like in tantrums, the guy, well, the voice, not the guy, but the male vocals. I remember a musician on our team that was helping me with this was like, good luck getting anybody to sing that note. And when I heard it, I was like, wow, even like I'm a drummer. I'm not a professional drummer, but I could drum. I could probably drum, I'll say 75, 80%, maybe even 90% of the percussion on these songs. There are some songs that I'm like, yeah, I don't even think Rick Allen with both arms would have been able to pull this off like right away, obviously with practicing it. And a lot of people have told me that, you know, like a lot of people would email me saying, okay, let's forget the AI slop comment. They're like, good luck, this sequence. That is not like something, but that's the beauty. I want the people now to take it and make it their own. Now, obviously, if we envision a heavy metal, hard rock, and they come back with something that's bluesy, I can say that's great, but that's not really what we wanted. And even I have an idea for how to do those, the ones that are so far off that we could still promote, but maybe not part of this initial phase, which is a bit more, hey, this is the vision. You say it's AI slop, make it better. You think you could do better? Do it better. But the reality is most musicians never really said that. It was really a lot of like, you know, younger fans who I understand they hear about AI. Like, I also get it. You have these idiot CEOs going out there saying AI is wonderful. It's going to make your job redundant. Yeah, guess what? People are not going to love AI. You know, so I think I kind of didn't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And I did want, as an entrepreneur, go back to the drawing board. And I'm very happy with the feedback, you know.
Totally. How much creative liberty in an ideal situation, how much creative freedom do you think musicians should take with these demos and putting their own personality into it? Or should it really be something where, you know, they have the outline, this is what the songs should sound like, try to get as close to that as possible? Like, what's your balance there?
So I really want to thank three groups. The 1% of Iranians who, when I was trying to help that cohort, would insult me and accuse me of nonsense. It was 1%, but you're like, what are these people crazy? But it taught me a lot. And then there's the 1% of the Expos fans and community who are just upset and pissed. Who is this guy? Who does he think? And it taught me a lot. And similarly this year, WatchMojo is something that I, with the team, built. Never wanted it to be about me. You know, like even with the music, I was like, I like music, but I like to create jobs and opportunities. So I kind of had to go through a little bit of like getting dragged and getting like a little bit maybe, I mean, look at what happened to Hank Green. When I saw what happened to poor Hank Green, like the last person, I mean, I'm not sure if he has any skeletons in his closet. What did the poor guy do to get dragged to that extent? But I did also kind of like, I needed to just go through that after the summer and just be like, okay, now to answer your question. Absolutely. Before the AI, I was so flexible. I was like, I envision an Iron Maiden Queensryche kind of thing. The other person could have sent me Joni Mitchell, and I would have been just polite and been like, oh, it's wonderful. It's a different take, but thank you. And here's the no, F that. You know, you guys had your day. You told me off. Great. You know, bring it. Like that doesn't bother me. Like I'm not a softie in that sense. But I am going to be very rigid as part of this initial one. Why? Because I already see the amount of feedback, right? So if 10 people are like, I want to do Diary Song, yes, I reserve the right to say, well, I will give you the $1,000 and much, much more if you really nail the spirit. Obviously, a lot of details, arrangement, vocals, a lot of things will change. That's fine. But I'm not going to be the way I was like a year ago where it could come back totally different. And I'm not going to have the heart to say, yeah, this isn't what I want. Now, I do think there is an opportunity to take these songs and the lyrics and whatever and branch out into really, really further away from what these demos capture. But for the initial ones, I do want to just prove my thesis. You know, as an entrepreneur, as a creative, I'm allowed to pursue it. And it's also nobody's obligated. It's not like I'm going to staff saying, you got to do this. It's literally a program for musicians who are interested. So you can take creative freedom, but as I say, like match it or make it better. You see what I was going for, and it's also an album. I know people are like, oh, the guy sits there, just touches prompt. No, not really. Current was like a journey. It's like different techno, EDM songs, reimagined as hard rock, but there's like a journey throughout the songs, and that's really almost more of a concept album. Area's a bit different in that it's the only through line is Iranian songs, and there's a side A and a side B, which again, there's a lot of thought that goes into it. But there was a lot of like deliberate thinking, right? Like even a song that was sung by female vocalists and male vocalists, there's a reason I went with like a male. So I'm just saying you could come back and even say, well, this one I want it to be sung by just a man or just a female, whatever. Like there's a lot like flexible on the details, but pretty rigid on what I was trying to accomplish with the 5 albums.
Praying for rain, praying for wind and change, praying for rain, praying for hell and rage.
Mechanically speaking, so you're committing $50,000 to this. That comes out to roughly $1,000 a song. There's 5 albums, about 10 songs in each. So $1,000 per fully recorded track, or the alternate model is 500 plus 50% revenue split. What was the thinking behind those options?
Sure. Yeah, so very transparent. So when we did the first like pre-AI, like I spoke to a number of musicians, literally without them talking to one another, the number was about 2,000, 2,500 that they wanted for a completed song. But this was me just describing it. There was nothing there. One time, one person was like, well, I also want rev share. And I explained to them there probably won't be rev share. And I said, just for administrative, it would be hard. But I said, what do you want? If it's just a flat fee. And I said, we'll give you the reporting, because some people asked. The reporting would be available regardless if you go 50%. And in fact, I'm willing to say after a period, if it does well, you could swap to revenue share. I'm even willing to do that. Like, I don't care about the money, right? Like, if it has to be fair. I don't want a musician to say, I wrote this song, it's generating millions of views. I see it's generating now $8,000. I just got 1,000. You know what? F it. I'll build in a mechanism that you can, after a period, swip. I don't care. It's got to be fair to the musicians. Like, and you know me how I am. It's got to be fair to the employee before it's fair to the employer. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. And I did just think of that on the spot, but I need to think of a way to implement it. But the main point was, after all this, when I was fine to walk away and never produce another song with or without AI, just be like, F this, I'm going to go on the Mediterranean and just write messages to myself that nobody cares. I spent a ton of time researching, and I had a lot of musicians. So I was just asking them, I said, well, I want a simple, scalable model. And I broke it, research and feedback broke it down. Like, what if somebody just plays the guitars, somebody just sings? What is the sum of that? What if somebody was like, we're part of a band? And literally everybody came to less than 1,000. It would have been less than 1,000 fully paid, because I like round numbers. And also I felt like, even if my intentions were not bad, to eliminate anybody preemptively, I was like, just round it up to 1,000. So the 1,000 was based on research and kind of like pre-market feedback from the musicians, the people that would ultimately have to say, yes, I'm interested or not. But I think it's more psychologically. There are some people that are always going to be like, what could have been? Regret minimization. Okay, if for you, you love the artistry, you love the process, you love the fact that like WatchMojo, if this works, there will be album. Also, imagine I work with a musician and it's great, and then they want to come afterwards and say, I'll have originals with it. Forget AI also. AI was literally just like a stepping stone to bring this project forward. It could be just like a normal traditional label. Then that could be something very different, And also here I have one person. By the way, the first 8 people that filled the form, I'm a doofus. I forgot to put a contact info field. And those were some good ones, but it's fine. Everything happens for a reason. At this point, I'm like Lieutenant Dan. Like, nothing crazy. So one person was like, well, I would love to do like the whole album. And I was like, sure, just email me whatever works for you. If it's reasonable, I'll consider it. So I do think, though, that there is now a very easy, clear path to kind of say, okay, I would also like to produce, and like wearing the Rick Rubin at Def Jam hat, wearing the Mutt Lang hat. Like, I'm not saying that they would embrace AI the same way WatchMojo can't go all in AI. It's an existing thing. But to a startup and an incumbent a challenger like SoundMojo, well, AI could be used in a step, but can't be the be all end all. So the idea is that then once we develop a roster of musicians, then the sky's the limit. Then many, many other things open up. Somebody could come and say, I'm a classical violinist, I'm a pianist, I want to do something great. But I will be a bit more like rigid to be like, no, because I had a vision, I got a lot of heat. 70% of it could have been unfair, but a lot of it was valid. I get it. I'm not going to be just the Mr. Nice Guy. The same way that with studios this time around, the second time around, I'm a lot more rigid. I'm going to be a bit more of like your typical record label exec that may not always be warm and fuzzy, but that has a clear idea of what I want to accomplish. And if it doesn't accomplish, all good. It's like, like Joe Pesci and Goodfellas. Not the first time I got to dig a grave and dump a body. Like we try things. Most of them don't work. One of them could be a grand slam, but I do think SoundMojo now is back on track to what I thought it could eventually be. But not really just for money, as we discussed. It's not like a lucrative thing. It's just something that I've always wanted to do. And now I'm like, why am I not doing these things?
Who do you think should be applying for to work on these songs? Are you looking for more like bands who can, or musicians who can produce an entire song? Or what if there's a guitarist who's like, oh, I could just make the guitar parts of the song way better? Is that an option too?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, like art, I've always said you can't put creative people in a box and say, do whatever you want, but within these parameters. So I think ideally, if there's a producer like who plays an instrument and can get the rest of the gang together, the band together, as we say, that is obviously easier. If there's like a band that has chemistry and they could just, take these songs and give them their own touch, that's better. But there are some like individuals, and the technology is there, who could we could kind of like, as these are coming in, be like, hey, that guy's voice with this guy's guitar and maybe that bassist and this drummer. And there are software. I remember a few years ago, I got pitched to invest in one. So I'm well aware at least of one that you could basically just virtually be in a studio type of thing. So I am looking at all of those options. I really want the best versions of these songs, and not just to take the lowest hanging fruit. My guess will be some of it will be that band, some of it will be a producer that just gets a band together, some of it will be individuals that then we bring together. And I like that as an entrepreneur. It's like ingredients coming together in a recipe.
And you mentioned that some of the albums have a kind of like cohesive flow to them. So I'd imagine in that case, it might be advantageous to hire one person to work on all 8 or all 10 songs, whereas other ones, like you said, they're a little bit more not disjointed, but each song has an individual style where you can probably involve more people, right?
Yeah, I mean, like on Aria, if you think of like, maybe that's like not an Avril Lavigne, sorry, that is a Miley Cyrus kind of song.
Its flavor. I long to live inside your heart so tender.
I like Miley Cyrus, I like Pink. It's like kind of a very different vibe than Tantrums, which are both kind of like rock vein, but clearly like in different aisles almost,
It still comes home.
So there, even though the album has a through line, I'm almost approaching it more like as a soundtrack, the soundtrack of Iran, So, it purposely starts off, I Have Come to You is like Gugush, it's like a very different sound than Tantrums, which the Iranian artist Moeen, it's like more like I reimagined it as like an Ozzy Osbourne Dio kind of you know, intensely dark kind of sound, right? So those you could have a guitarist play both, but clearly the singers should be different.
I came back with nothing left to hide. Through the darkness of my pride, I came back, though the world said let you go.
Current is actually a bit different. Current, I could see like a guy who loves Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, you know, just basically saying, no, I want to do all this. But yeah, like some parts are impossible, some parts I just don't like, some parts I find not good, I want to make it better. Current, I think, would make sense if one person just views it as like beginning to end. But each one is different, right? I mean, the one where I admit I maybe went overboard too quickly was Heat. Heat is a rap. I mean, I grew up listening to all genres. Heat, it really just started off with Judgment Day, which was like a diss track that I wrote about my frustration with the powers that be in Montreal not helping with the expos when they would all benefit the most. So it's like you read the lyrics, anybody that's like, this is AI slop is like, no, this seems to be the guy's like manifesto telling the city, like, wake up, you idiots.
Hey, yo, born on third base, narrating like you hit it out. I was in the dugout, drawing plays to get us out. Silver spoon talk, but the hunger never lived in you. I was starving for it, different cloth I'm cut into.
You know, like we're trying to compete in the major leagues. You're all a bunch of amateurs. It's a diss track. So that's okay. But I kind of obviously then said, ooh, wait, what if, and this is part of the roadmap, I was like, I'm working on this project in studios called Terms and Conditions. The male protagonist, there's a through line of always being an outsider, somebody's not trying to accomplish something, but they can't all be an Iranian Canadian, you know, like it can't all be that. So for that one, the protagonist is probably like a young, black, ambitious professional who is trying to make it. I'll share here like what the log line and all that is. So growing up, like I was like, I love rap, but why is every lyric about bitches, booze, weed, and, you know, thug life? Let's be honest. So I wanted to make it more about ambition and success, a guy who's trying to make it in the corporate world.
Liquidate your ass, strip it to the bone, sell it piece by piece, now you out the zone. Fire sale prices, everything must go. You built it for years, I dismantle it slow.
So all of the songs have that theme, you know, like liquidate your ass. Like, okay, like, and some guy was like, this is cultural appropriation. And you know what? I laughed. No, forget Eminem and all. No, I laughed, but I was like, this guy's got a point. They see this guy pumping out, you know, they don't know the backstory. And maybe I could have explained how all of these came to be. But that is a perfect thing. Like for that, again, a lot of these projects, now we have 4 or 5 studios projects that are really advanced since even the last time. So for that one, I would love to cast, don't laugh, like a young, aspiring black actor who's also a singer, rapper, who writes his own lyrics. But then I would be like, here's a bunch of songs I wrote and lyrics and themes. Let's now build like a 360-degree thing where this is the soundtrack to Terms and Conditions, and you are now cast in this movie, and you're like a double threat, actor, singer, rapper. So to me, what do I get? It's like, it's nothing. It's like, why would I do it apart from getting ridiculed? But I, you know, when I presented like that, people are like, that's pretty smart. It's different. It works, right? So it's just, again, using technology to accomplish things that were in my head, that if I explain this to some rapper actor off the street, he'd be like, who is this crazy person? But now with the demos, that guy's like, this is pretty clever. That guy is not like cultural appropriation because he understands I ain't putting on blackface and gonna go act as a, you know, like, so it's kind of like some of the feedback was just funny, but it's really smart. And even the legal side, I've explained it. I'm giving you the playbook. This is like WatchMojo 20 years ago. People could do it, but you're gonna get some shit because there's AI that was used. But like, to me, the smart one was balance, because aria, those are derivative works. They're not really just a license, you need permission from the artist, which we're working on. That's why they weren't on Spotify. But balance, we took classical songs that are in the public domain and we wrote lyrics and we kind of envisioned a universe for each and a through line and heard thousands of demos. But the songs, Fame and Fortune, people listened to it, loved it the first week. They're like, ultimate banger, love it. And then when like the internet culture drama channels were like, WatchMojo sucks. Oh, and they did AI. Then everybody was like, this sucks. My ears are bleeding. But I'm like, that's not really showing me you have taste. That shows me you're a sheep. Because you're just literally, you see the comments the first month, everybody's loving it, loving it, loving it. And then after, everybody's like, this is AI slop. But what I'm getting at is that addresses the issue of copyright. That basically you can copyright the lyrics. And guess what? If somebody now takes Fame and Fortune and puts it their own spin and they kind of, change the riffs, change the solos, we change the lyrics, that is a fully copyrightable, work that kind of addresses a lot of the challenges in this space, right? So again, the feedback, some of it was unfair. I didn't focus on the part that was unfair. I really just went to the spirit of the feedback. And then I said, just don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. The songs were fine. And you know what you were going to do, just bring up the fund. And now I'm like, shit, I have all these musicians that I got to get back to and start to figure out, is this a band or is this an ensemble that I'm kind of bringing together, and then give them the technology where they can do this. If the perfect singer is in Winnipeg and the perfect guitarist is in Madrid, how do you bring them together at first to do this?
Right. And I was just thinking, as you were talking about the concept for that one song, about how, struggling against the powers that be here in Montreal, that there's probably a lot of people in the local scene that you could reach who would be very, in terms of proximity, very close, and you can, get them all into a room and stuff like that.
It's as if we scripted this. I had a shit ton of people in Montreal who approached me like in February, March, April, May. And then even after, again, 1% of 1%, but like even when people were like, oh, this is AI, you suck, this sucks, off type of thing, I was still getting musicians saying, no, I use AI in the same way. It's a bit touchy. I'd like to be involved. Are you ever going to bring on musicians? And I was like, giddy up. And that's what kind of pulled me back in, because I'm an accountable person. And I was like, I can't drop these people. I started talking to them about this project, but I was like, I don't want to sit one-on-one and be like, hey, I wrote It's Inevitable about the Expos return. I think you'd be a great local artist that I've sung about the Expos. But what is your vision? What is my vision? And then in the end, it's a very different thing. So I'm like, here's what I want. Make it better. You can make it different, but it can't be so different that it's unrecognizable. Yeah. That is now what we're doing. But again, as part of this fund, it's a lot easier. There's not a negotiation. I'm not putting a value on their work. I'm like, this, people seem to like it. The feedback, everybody says it's fair. If anything, the feedback is it's even more than fair, because if you're like a established artist touring, this probably isn't for you. You never know. They could be like, it's fun, it's different, low lift, but it is more for good musicians who are looking to break through. There's also the media, there's the marketing, the touring. We used to do events. One of the reasons I want to bring back events is to showcase these artists. And then we would show that, like we did WatchMojo Live in London and New York, across our network. So it's a bit of a no-brainer, but I admit I had to go through a bit of a grinder to then kind of say, well, why are you being stupid? Just start with the fund.
Yeah, makes sense. One of the criticisms that was levied against the demos, not towards the music itself, but just the concept of having AI do the work that could have been done by people. From another perspective, you could say that this project maybe would never have actually happened if it hadn't been for the AI taking the first steps to create those demos. So what's your position on that argument?
So again, that I could see both sides of it. Let me actually add something. Somebody could say, well, why did you even use AI? Why did you not hire the musicians to create these? And that's what we did the first year. It was just hard creatively to convey. And then just logistically, it was just, and also again, you guys hear me in meetings. I always go, just think of the video, think of the entry. we don't need to think of the next 100 videos. You have to make that good. It's like when I cook food, you got to make that dish good. You can't think of everything else. But it's because we tried that and it didn't work. And then AI gave like a very non-emotional way to refine the versions and be like, I like this part of this demo. This part is really not working for me. You're not hurting anybody's feelings, you know, and that's, I don't like to hurt people's feelings. People seem to like to hurt people's feelings online, but I'm like, I'm not going to go tell, like, let's say if 10 years ago I asked you to do whatever, you know, any song, and I'm like, you send it to me, I'm going to look for the positives. And I'm like, it wasn't really what I wanted, but okay. So that would not have gone anywhere.
Yeah.
So the difference now is, and 50,000 is just a start. Imagine if the same way that WatchMojo was created over 1,000, but at least for hundreds of people, long-term employment with health plan and vacation and all that. Like, this is a path now that we could really start to build out a roster of musicians. Now imagine where this goes. Imagine if we also got them, instead of just like stock music, imagine if we featured them, where the same way we have voiceover by Ricky or Rebecca, the stock music in the back was, this riff is by Jack C, you know, or this beat is, because again, forget AI that in like 2 months of 2026 people lost their mind on. Like, this too shall pass, you know. Eventually it's a label. And the same way that we go to somebody and we're like, hey, we're editing this new thing. It's kind of a podcast. It's not just a montage and clips. Could you edit that? Like, we have that talent, right? We could shoot like a movie if we wanted to. It's a different budget. So what we're doing now is we're just expanding. We're adding musicians to our roster of creatives. And again, you can criticize WatchMojo. Please criticize WatchMojo, because the day nobody talks about you is the day that, like, I don't look forward to. I rather if people praise. Nobody's going to praise. They're going to criticize. So talk about it. But you know, WatchMojo will probably be the last media company that will still have humans on payroll. And that's just true. You know, like the trend is going where? Layoffs, AI, automation, outsourcing, and we're still here. We'll have, you know, we have more people on staff producing content than most companies. So for me, yeah, I won't lie. I was kind of, I want to find a way to get into pursuing music, but in a way that for a company of 100 employees our size, I wasn't going to boil the ocean doing one song after a year and a half, because I do have to justify it, right? I mean, it's resources. Just us talking about it today, you know?
Yeah, totally. What is the roadmap for a song once it's completed? So let's say the artist, you know, takes the 50-50 split and they're wondering, all right, what's going to actually happen to generate revenue for this song once it's produced?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, all the places that are available to us already. So whether it's YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and all that. But I also think, yes, this opens up Spotify. This opens up a lot of other places. I know, sorry, not for all, but some of them also, they will be used in soundtracks to WatchMojo Studios productions. But I also think that then we could have, imagine almost like we figure out where the music is, where the musicians are. And what if the next WatchMojo Live is in Miami, let's say, because we got 5 or 6 musicians there. So there, you know, you fly down a Rebecca, a Phoebe, a Ricky, meet and greet. You have some kind of like thing that is trivia or giveaway. And the music acts are not random. They're actually SoundMojo artists. I know NFTs a few years ago were a big joke, and I agree. NFTs, the way that they were deployed was ridiculous. But the concept of baking in and using blockchain to track ownership, track reporting, track monetization, and all that, especially think of it if you got a guitarist, a singer, you know, those are things that I'm also willing to look into, invest in, and just build as the foundation, if it makes sense. So I do view it a bit as an entrepreneur, like, oh, wow, if you did have to start Def Jam in 2026, well, yeah, it would probably have an element of AI, even if it's just take these lyrics I wrote and make them flow better because I'm, you know, racking my head around a syllable that is off, sometimes it's an editing tool. The generative part, I agree, is more thorny, by the way. The generative part of AI, I hear you loud and clear. But what I'm getting at is I do want to just like if you start a label today, you should use, NFTs should be renamed, but you should use some of the aspects and features of NFTs to track ownership, to track reporting and all that. And then also you could just tie it to payments. So people will have access to the reporting real time. It's not just some random report that they get and they're just, here's a check, and they'll also see if something does well. They could come and say, hey, I was always more into blues, but I see this hard rock kind of songs are doing really, really great. I could do that. You got more? And I could be like, yeah, I got all these songs I want to produce. Or it could be like, why don't you pitch us your songs? So eventually we'll go more towards getting, submissions as well, but that could go off the rails. So I want to keep it kind of more controlled at first.
Cool. Before we wrap it up, I want you to talk to me a little bit about Next Great Band. What's the concept behind this?
Yeah, I mean, Next Great Band, I think, obviously if you are in media, you realize that reality TV has kind of changed the landscape. And you also realize that like reality TV is a bit stale, although there's always like a show that comes and kind of does well. But, I mean, if you think of the two OGs, I think realistically you got Survivor and you got American Idol. So I don't want to, when I realized American Idol was turning 25, I was like, oh, I can imagine their problem is they get pitched a million things the way we are known for, let's say, top 10. So if somebody came to us with like a different take on top 10, we're like, we don't know. It's kind of like we're told to stay in our lane. So I was like, I wouldn't pitch this to American Idol. It was just a coincidence that I had dinner with Simon Fuller. But I was like envisioning a show, like if today you had all these songs and you were effectively building like a super band, but not really a super band, just a band that would go then on tour and record and, play these songs. So we're still going to do that, but I just felt a bit sheepish to ask people to like come to Montreal or drive to or fly to LA or New York when it seemed like most of the interested musicians were a bit scattered. So now that we have exponentially more musicians interested in the fund, I could plot out where these people are and more easily plan that and be like, hey, you know what? Most of you seem to be far closer to Miami or New York or even London or wherever. So that is also being worked, but obviously it might change, meaning let's say there is a band that does most of the hard rock stuff. And now we're looking for more of like a band that's fronted by a female singer and it's like a pop hard rock. You know what I mean? Like it'll be probably used more to fill in the gap. Whereas the first version was really just finding one band that could perform like most of these songs. But now within just a few days, I'm like, we're going to have so many musicians that it's more about quality and it's more about do they get the right sound. But I do definitely still plan on doing the show, but the show will probably reflect the talent more than the songs. It'll just be more about like, who do we have and what can we develop as a show? But yeah, it'll happen. Just sometimes you just have to resequence things.
Cool. Makes sense. Well, I know you've already gotten a lot of interest from the survey that you put out from people, but if there's anyone watching who is a musician and is interested or knows somebody who might be interested, what should they do?
Well, the first thing is you should submit your info in the Google form that is just talking about the fund. But then by the time this is published, there will also be a list of the songs, and it'll probably be something like the green ones are definitely we're going to do. The yellow ones, if you listen to it and you like it, you should just reach out and say, I'd like to do this. And then I just have to think admittedly of like a way, like you send us like you play a riff for us to be like, okay, this is kind of what we're looking for. Or if somebody might just want to, if they're a little Mozart, just bang it all out. And, and it's like, do you share it on social? Do you submit it? Like the logistics have to, like, this is in real time. But yeah, I think basically just submit your info and the first 8 go back, please, and add your contact info. That's on me. But then pick some of the songs. And then there is a bit of like, I also don't want this to be super cold. Like I do want to get to meet the musicians, and like see what their repertoire is like. But then once we kind of like are on the same page, then you just press record. And this is the tip of the iceberg, right? I mean, there will be a lot more songs. And before people go crazy, maybe I won't use AI because yes, the environment and, even though in aggregate golf courses do use a lot more water than data centers, it is true that a single data center does use a little bit more water than it should for this purpose. But my point is, I just want to be very clear. We may never use AI for demos. Once I know somebody and I'm like, this guy's got the sound I want, I could just describe to them what I was describing AI. But
This is true.
but the reality was, until I had these songs, people were like, well, this guy's just a business guy. Okay, you wrote a book, so what? Now, I mean, they're like, yeah, this is pretty good. They're like, this is like too good. And we know why, because AI, it does create something that is not necessarily human. It's math, so
Right.
like,
And once you,
if you understand.
once you establish the network of musicians, then there's a lot more flexibility to come up with demos in different ways that doesn't lean so much on AI.
I mean, one thing that I hate about the company getting bigger is that I don't really know everybody. Like, I know who they are, but I don't really know what they like and stuff. And when I work with people, I could like come to you and be like, yeah, I'm working on this. What do you think? I could go to Yvonne and say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And people aren't like, why is the boss? They're like, oh, it's just a guy on the team asking about an idea he has. So yeah, I think once we build up the roster of musicians, then my goal is just to go to them and say, hey, I always wanted to do an album that was like this, inspired by this. These are some song ideas. And at that point, it could also be that, like, I don't think this is a weird thing to say. It's a bit like Mutt Lang. He wrote a lot of the lyrics, and the Phil Collin would write lyrics and give them to Joe Elliott, or like Rick Savage, the bassist, composed a lot of the music, and somebody else wrote the lyrics, right? So it's the same thing. It's just AI was for me a way to just compress time after a very frustrating, year, if not even decade, to try to get this off the ground.
Makes sense. And I know that you have a whole alphabet's worth of albums in your head to produce. So we've
that I could be dragged. But basically it was area balance. And again, I stopped after 5, but it was area balance current dash, which is related to a studios project. There was everything. Heat, return. We had it all. I mean, but yes, eventually, like the Global Underground series, there will be at least A through Z albums. And I'm not saying those would be AI, because now I feel like I could tell people this is what I want, and they're like, okay, I see what you're trying to convey. Instead of not really listening to me and coming with something that was so different, I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. This is not what I wanted. How am I putting this on?
Well, it sounds very encouraging. We have links in the description for all the resources and information that we have, and a link to apply if you are interested in working on any of these songs.
One last thing, if you don't mind. I remember Ice-T, when asked about music videos, he was like, that shit. He's like, nobody's producing music videos. If you want music videos, it's only going to be AI. It was Ice-T. It wasn't Ice Cube. On a previous show, I might have said Ice Cube. I know they're different people. Don't worry. But so I do want to go and produce music videos. Like, there's a pair of songs, meaning to say, like 80s Def Leppard sound. Meaning to say is like a couple before they start dating, all lovey-dovey, and then let it be. It's afterwards. That's kind of like a concept I have as well, and I'm not inventing anything, but it's like 2 songs that go together, and the music videos kind of tell a story.
Meaning this day, if I said it out loud, would it change everything? Would it fall apart or finally begin?
So that's also what I want to build. I want to build, ideally, imagine if the singer of that song is the actor. Now, he may not be, but the idea is to also start casting actors. And that might be more Montreal at first. But imagine if we also then started to produce music videos for all these songs, and not just the way we did in the first incarnation, which was largely B-roll. There was no AI. I'm pretty 99.9% sure there was no generative AI in the music videos. Those were just B-roll or whatever. But my goal with those is the same thing. Once you have musicians, then be like, hey, buddy, we're coming over, or we're sending this camera guy. and we're going to shoot because that's going to be the B-roll, you on stage to this couple that's like running in a forest or all the cliches, right? But so I think it's totally fair to bash and push back, but like people should educate themselves a bit. You know, I don't mind when people criticize, but what I find fascinating is I think one person emailed me saying, "Oh, I'm going to do a video about this. I want to ask you some questions." And then they were like, "Okay, this is not that interesting." Most of the criticism was, to be fair, like I took the shit, but most of the criticism was actually kind of misinformation, you know, like misunderstanding. So if you're also like watching this and you have ideas, like I don't want people to think like this is a rigid blueprint now. Somebody could come to me and be like, "Hey, I tried this before AI. I love this concept." Oh yeah, I actually had a bunch of people email me saying, "Hey, what you're doing with balance, here's some bands." And I know there's like Transylvania, like I'm not talking about older stuff, like Iron Maiden is all, you know, the Butcher of Seville is kind of like something Iron Maiden could have done, inspired by Barber of Seville. But I also do expect some people just to come out of the woodworks and be like, "Hey, I've actually done this. I'd love to do it because I need the promo or I need the muscle or I just need income." Right. So this kind of has opened up the floodgates in just a week. And so I was like, okay, I could sleep on it. But I feel like now it just takes a bit of nudge and a bit of coordination. But so it'll be very much like a traditional label in that sense, including music videos and tours and much, much more.
Cool. Well, an ambitious project, but I like where it's going. Can't wait to see what happens next. So like I said, if anybody's interested in learning more, click the links in the description, and we'll be back next time we have some updates. Thanks again, Ash. It's always great to talk to you.
Likewise.
Take care.
Thank you, gentlemen. Take care.